whole super family for me. All a lot of times I just wake up and you need love.
What happens now? You'll get over heartache. You'll get over heartache. You'll get over heartache. Carry on, don't fear the fall, 'cause you'll get over.
Another episode of What's Happening Now with Laura. I will warn you, this evening, tonight's show is going to be very, very somber. Very somber because it's going to be dealing with issues that I've dealt with before in the past, but issues obviously that we keep having to hop on over and over and over again until the culture changes, until the script, the narrative takes a different turn. We'll leave it at that for now. After the break, I will introduce to you what our substantive topic for this evening is going to be. However, before we do that, I want to discuss a few things. You know, we usually have our trending and we'll keep it quite brief this evening because I want to wrap with you, St. Lucia, one-on-one on this scourge, this culture that we have where we are so insensitive to people who are different to us. Now, I know last week or the last time we were on live, I introduced this year's Let's Talk About Sex series. We're going to take a brief pause from that series simply because there is a topic that I want to deal with. I needed to deal with, and I will continue to deal with it. And I know there are some of you out there who are going to think that perhaps I too am a victim because after all, when I first started doing this show and started putting the spotlight on rape and the culture of rape, I was insensitively asked whether I had been raped before, which is why I was so passionate about rape. You know, there's this saying that goes, whomever feels it knows it. You don't always have to feel something physically firsthand to be an advocate for or an advocate against a certain action. And I think for a nation which constantly harps on the fact that we're a Christian nation, at least maybe 75, 80% Christian, if not more, in its various denominations, we should be a more loving, a more caring people. But before this, as I said, a few trending topics. The UK Civil Aviation Authority, CAA, said the tour operator Thomas Cook had ceased trading with immediate effect. Now, some of you may not even know who Thomas Cook is. Some of you might be wondering, well, why does it affect us in St. Lucia? Some of you may be wondering, where's she going with this? If you would recall, last week, our Minister of Tourism and the Prime Minister were exhorting our performance in the UK market, in England. And in fact, the Minister of Tourism, on his return from England, actually said he had spoken to Thomas Cook. Even in the House of Parliament, he brought up Thomas Cook as a viable replacement for Virgin. Now, if we've been following current trends and current affairs in St. Lucia, we will recall a few weeks ago, Virgin Atlantic had given us notice that they were pulling out of St. Lucia. And so our Ministry of Tourism, headed by Minister Dominic Fede, had been looking for viable replacements. And the reason we were given by Minister Fede for the pullout is that Virgin was asking us to invest, pretty much, for want of a better phrasing, in their business and bringing in vacationers into St. Lucia. And what they were asking was too high a price for St. Lucia. And I, for one, I tend to agree with not being held ransom for business transactions. So if it's going to be a business transaction, it's going to benefit you, it's going to be benefiting me. It cannot seem to benefit you more than it's benefiting me. And if it is that you're asking us for what, I think it's $20 million, correct me if I'm wrong, because the figure is not right at the tip of my tongue right now. But whatever it was an exorbitant amount. And we know that we don't have the money. And if we don't have the money and we need to boost our healthcare, we need to boost our security, police-wise, port-wise. We need to curb crime in our country without assistance from the usual suspects. Then it's incumbent upon our officials to say, hey, you're asking something that we cannot deliver on. And if Virgin knows that, well, they can get it elsewhere, of course, it is incumbent upon them as well to go where the money is, to go where the business is. But we know that we're not the only one that Virgin has tried to extort that kind of money from. And we know that we're not the only country going to be feeling the pinch of their exit from our territory. However, the minister assured us that he had it under control and that he had been speaking with viable alternatives, and one of those viable alternatives was Thomas Cook. Well, we have since learned that Thomas Cook has folded and that the British government is now having to bring back, in peacetime, over 100,000 people. I think it was about 150,000 people that booked vacations with Thomas Cook. And in the past, I mean, I worked in tourism before in a previous life, and Thomas Cook was one of the tour operators that you could set your clock by back in the day. But of course, times have changed, things change, fortunes change. So now Thomas Cook has gone belly up, they're flopped. I wonder, last week, when the minister and the prime minister met with Thomas Cook, what exactly was discussed? Because I am certain that Thomas Cook would have known back then, 1 week ago, that they were not in a position to make any promises to anyone. They couldn't even make promises to the 21,000 people that they employ. And so they were not in any position to make any promises. So I wonder now, the question that I want to know is, what was discussed at that meeting? Is it a case where something was discussed but nothing in stone? But you've got to appease the people, so you're hoping against hope, or you putting all your eggs in a basket, or you hoping that something will come out of it? Is it a case where a situation was misread? What exactly was discussed? What exactly was finalized at that meeting? We need to know. We demand to know. And this is not a political game. It's not, opposing for opposing's sake. It really is, a door was opened and now we're walking through it. We want to know what was discussed and how is it that the minister could have erred so badly to say that things were looking up and that a viable alternative was Thomas Cook, when obviously it isn't. Who knows? Well, Joe knows. And in this case, I'm talking about Josiah Castang. St. Lucia's latest snake bite survivor. Yes. At first, when I heard Joe knows, I was like, oh, that's really bad. That's, this happened to a tour operator on island. And everybody in my circle thought I should know who Joe Knows is, but for some reason, it wasn't clicking. And finally, it clicked yesterday. I know Josiah. I worked with him, and like I said in the previous life when I worked in tourism, and I was very shocked to know that he was the one. And so my sympathies and everything and my prayers go out to Josiah and his family. And I hope he does make a recovery, a complete recovery. Because although he's come out and said, he's been discharged from the hospital, he's in a bit of discomfort, we still know that there could be complications that could arise out of being bitten by the Featherloss, which is a really, really very, very, very venomous snake. You could still have issues with blood clotting and that kind of thing. But when I listened to Josiah's account of what happened, the comedy of errors that took place, it's really funny. It's really, one of the things that I've always said, that in St. Lucia, we do not do sufficient PSAs. So we come out with a public service announcement. We probably got funding for a period of time, but we do not sustain. Maybe something happened to trigger, the catalyst. And so we come up with this PSA, but we only run it for a brief period of time. The only way these things can become a part of our evoked set is if there's continuous repetition. And I do recall that there was a PSA on what to do should you be bitten by a venomous snake. I think we have that clip. Let's run the tape.
I was in my neighborhood. It was a very dark night. I decided to go for a drink by a bar. On my way from the bar, I felt the sting to my right leg. And when I looked back, I knew it was a featherless snake.
You happen to be in an area where there are snakes and you are bitten by a snake. This is what you do. You call for help and try to reach the Victoria Hospital within 1 or 3 hours. You will be seen immediately.
My uncle at the time was a police officer, called Victoria Hospital and told them that we're coming down for snake bite.
It is the only facility on the island which has a protocol and a treatment plan where you can be treated adequately.
We call them before you go there so they can prepare for you.
And rest assured that there are adequate supplies of antivenom with doctors who have been trained in the treatment protocols of the snake bite.
This is a PSA that was run some time ago. And I distinctly remember, because, I don't come from an area which is prevalent, where snakes are prevalent, but I do have family members who live in areas that where snakes are prevalent. And I have a thing with snakes, about snakes. I don't like them. They give me the jitters. They creep me out. Even in a book, if the page is glossy enough, I will literally feel that these snakes are jumping out off the page and at me. So I don't like them, so I pay attention to this. And I think that's the problem with a lot of us in St. Lucia. We do not pay attention to anything if it does not affect us directly. So this PSA came out, and it distinctly says, and we'll run the tape again, it distinctly says, police should call the police, get somebody, call Victoria Hospital in advance. So on your way to the hospital, you call the hospital and let them know you're coming in with a victim, a snake bite victim, so that they can prepare for you. The clip also states, Dr. Martin Didier also states clearly that the only institution with the anti-snake venom is Victoria Hospital, and that there is adequate snake bite, the snake bite venom, anti-snake bite venom, to treat persons who have been bitten. He also clearly states that you should get there between 1 to 3 hours. 1 to 3 hours. So when I'm listening to Josiah recount what happened and that the police took him to Tapio, I'm asking myself, was the training not done with every single police officer, with every single first responder? Because as a first responder, responding to a snake bite, there is a protocol. And again, we'll run the tape again so we can understand and bear it in mind. And I'm asking, I'm pleading, we don't need another touch and go situation. Josiah did not have to go through as much discomfort, anguish, and concern over his very life, his very survival. Had he been taken directly to VH, anything could have happened. But you're cutting down the chances of something negative happening if you follow protocol. Clearly, call the police. They take you to VH, Victoria Hospital. On the way there, you call them in advance to let them know that you are coming with a snake bite victim and that they should be prepared to see you immediately, because the anti-snake bite venom is only effective if administered between 1 to 3 hours. That didn't happen in Josiah's case, according to his own recollection. So let's run the tape again.
I was in my neighborhood. It was a very dark night, and I decided to go for a drink by a bar. On my way from the bar, I felt the sting to my right leg. And when I looked back, I knew it was a full-less snake.
You happen to be in an area where there are snakes and you are bitten by a snake. This is what you do. You call for help and try to reach the Victoria Hospital within 1 or 3 hours. You will be seen immediately.
My uncle at the time was a police officer, called Victoria Hospital and told them that we're coming down for snake bite.
It is the only facility on the island which has a protocol and a treatment plan where you can be treated adequately.
We call them before you go there so they can prepare for you.
And rest assured that there are adequate supplies of antivenom with doctors who have been trained in the treatment protocols of the snake bite.
And that was sponsored by Jeff, SGP, UNDP, and the rest you saw at the end of the clip. So it hurts me. It really does hurt me when donor agencies give funding for PSAs and we don't pay attention. We don't pay attention. We do not consistently run those PSAs. So I am assuming now that the PSAs will be run, but for how long? Until another snake bite? Until somebody dies? And the worst thing of it is, people have been getting bitten recently from this bite. I remember there was this, I think it was 2014, this gentleman from Canaries. He had been bitten before, and the second time he was bitten, he succumbed. One of his sons had been bitten before, and they had been having issues with snakes. And I almost said encroaching in settlements. But the snakes are not encroaching into settlements. We are encroaching into snake territory. And so we have to be cognizant of where we are, when we're there, and that there is a very real possibility that we could be bitten by a snake. And what to do should we be bitten by a snake? Who should we call? And if they're unaware, have the presence of mind to repeat the protocol. Call for help, call VH, get there within 1 to 3 hours, and get the antivenom administered. Call for help, call VH. Let them know that you're coming with a snake bite victim. Get there within 1 to 3 hours and demand, if for some reason, because we know the horror stories, demand to be treated immediately. Because Dr. Martin Didier did not mince words. If you call for help and you call to let them know that you're coming in advance, they will see you to administer that venom. This is how deadly the fer de lance venom is. So you've got to do it right away. Don't go to Tapion. Don't go to St. Jude. Don't go to your health center. Don't go to Soufriere Hospital. Don't go to Dennery. Don't go to the polyclinic. Don't go anywhere but straight to VH. And on your way there, call to let them know so they are prepared. That is very important. Dr. Didier said it. The survivor said it. Call in advance to let them know. Josiah was not given that opportunity. He was taken to Tapion. Then they did not call VH to let VH know that they were coming. So when they got there, they were not prepared and they had to wait. He could have died. He could have lost his leg. Today, the narrative would have been completely different. So let's not let this happen again. Let us do the right thing. Let us pay attention to PSAs as they come about, and let us be mindful of them so that when the need arises, we could do the right thing. We're due for a break. When we come back, my substantive issue for the night. Stay tuned.
What happens now? You'll get
Welcome back, St. Lucia. Thank you for staying tuned. And the messages have started coming this evening. And I'm speaking to you, and I'm getting goose pimples all over my body. This evening, I want to talk to you about depression. Last week, I received 3 clips two dealing with one particular person, and another sent chills down my spine. The first two, well, the first one that I received was not dealing with St. Lucians, but rather a young lawyer in the prime of her life, having just completed schooling, a linguist by every account, a linguist par excellence, a brilliant young woman, you know, the apple of her father's eye. And I really wish that I could play some of the clips for you, where you're hearing the pride in the father's voice, coming out of school, getting her dream job, and really wanting to start off to help the people of her country, Anguilla. A native Antiguan transplanted to Anguilla. And she apparently had been involved with this guy. And for whatever reason, the relationship wasn't working out. And they broke up. And in the voice note, you're hearing this individual very calmly saying, you know, that there are times, there are nights when he just wakes up and he just wants to very calmly pick up his gun and go across and shoot her and then take his own life, because she's the woman that he wants to spend the rest of his life with, and he doesn't see his life without her in it in the future. And that if he cannot have her, he doesn't see why anybody else should have her. And so he sends her this clip, this voice note. And about a week or so, I think it was, later, he actually broke into her house and stabbed her to death. He did not follow up with the promise of killing himself later. From all accounts, he tried to hide the murder weapon. So he had no intentions. He was just really talking. He had no intentions of killing himself. And he didn't do it clinically with a gun as he promised. He did it personally with a knife and stabbed her to death. That was the first clip that I received. I got all these pictures and I was wondering, okay, who is this person? You know, in her various graduation gowns, beautiful girl. Then another picture of her in this queen, this pageant gown, lovely, lovely, lovely young lady. And then this other guy, handsome young man. And I'm wondering, what happened? Did somebody kill them? And I was thinking this was something that had happened in St. Lucia. And then the voice note came and I realized, oh, this is obsession. This is not love gone wrong. This is obsession. And he actually did it. So I was still reeling from this, you know, this information, this clip. And I was doing all this research and going and find out, you know, what happened, because the person who sent it to me did not send enough narration. So I went online and I Googled it, and then come to find out that her father was an ambassador, I think to Cuba, for Antigua or something. But he was a person of a well-known person in Antigua, and you could hear the anguish in his voice when he's talking about what he wants to do, or what he wants done to this young man who had so callously taken his daughter away from him. And then boom, I'm slapped with these two clips of this young lady crying and begging for help, and she needs help because she's so depressed, and somebody needs to help her before she does the unimaginable and takes her life. And I said to myself, oh dear Lord, please let this be a social experiment. Please let this be a social experiment. And the reason I was praying and hoping that it was a social experiment is because of the comments attached to the clips, the derogatory things that were said. And I couldn't believe, here it is. We're always talking about, if you in a situation where you just feel your life is spiraling out of control, you're depressed, that you need to get help, that you need to talk it out. Don't try to deal with it on your own, because you're obviously not going to be the best person to talk yourself off that ledge. And there were so many bad things said about this young lady, and I felt so bad. I felt almost immobilized. And I sat on this, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to contact her. And I finally calmed myself down, and I thought about it, and I was able to reach out. And I, not knowing how to deal with it, not knowing what was the best way, I thought the best way that I could deal with it, because I'm also being affected right at that moment, was to just come out and ask the question, and just be bold and confront it head on, and to ask whether it was a social experiment. Well, it so happened not to have been a social experiment, which I was hoping, and that it was a real cry for help. And thankfully, that young lady is getting the help that she needs. But what if she didn't get the help? That is, what if she had read all the things that were said? Because we're living in an era where social media makes or breaks you. We're living in an environment where people can make you feel the vilest things about yourself, the most debased things about yourself, if you're not strong. And if you're already battling depression, it's like somebody taking a loaded gun, putting it in your hand, taking that hand, putting it to your temple, and gently depressing that trigger finger, blowing your brains out. So whilst it is your finger depressing that trigger, and whilst it is your hand holding that gun, somebody is like a marionette at your side, causing your hand to go up, because it's causing you to pick up that gun in the first place. Hand to go up, put it to your head, and pull. When we say these things, when we shame people, this is what we're doing. And sometimes we see people and they're smiling, and they're always smiling, always have a sunny disposition. And then you wake up to the news that person has taken their life. And then you say, what? That person is always smiling. The person is always laughing. The person is always, the life of the party. What happened? I remember feeling that way when Robin Williams, famous comedian, killed himself. And I'm like, this is a man who makes a living out of making people happy, bringing joy to people's lives, making people laugh. And you're so depressed that you can't stand living anymore, that you kill yourself. And so I did some research on depression. And I want to preface that by saying that a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with a priest nonetheless. And we were talking about depression. And it was amazing. It was amazing how, yes, even the clergy sometimes battle depression. Because you know why? We're all human. We're all human. We all suffer from, moments of weaknesses. Jesus was tempted. Jesus asked that the cup of crucifixion pass him over. He knew his death was imminent. And he said, Father, if it pleases you, and I'm paraphrasing here, let this cup pass me over. He knew he had to die. But he didn't want to. And this is Jesus Christ we're talking about here. So who are we mortals not to go through moments of uncertainty, moments of doubt, moments where things are just not clear, moments where things we were told and taught as kids, the harsh reality of it comes barreling down all at once, and we realize that we were sold a bag of bull. That we were sold a bag of bull. Doesn't exist. Utopia doesn't exist. Complete euphoria does not exist. What we have in its stead is life with all of its carbuncles. Sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. But the important thing is how to keep that balance. And I don't have an expert with me this evening because I wanted to let you know how this affected me. Listen, I once worked with this girl who left work. Happiest we'd seen her in months. Happiest we'd seen her in months. She went home, and on the Monday when we came back to work, we were told that she had taken her life. How do you deal? How do you cope? And I remember feeling so violated. And I remember I just couldn't stop vomiting. I felt like this person was my sister. This was a person that I saw every day at work. This was a person that I worked with very closely at work. This was a person who was always smiling, always happy, whom people gravitated towards. And she felt so alone. She felt so alone that she didn't even think twice about the unborn baby in her tummy. She took her life. And here it is. She didn't make this big cry, this big plea for help. She just quietly went home and took her life. And here it is. This person is asking for help, is begging for help, is doing it in the most public way to reach the most people that she possibly can. And there are people amongst us who live with us, who smile with us, who pretend that they are humans, laughing and ridiculing. I wonder if this young Anguillan man, when he said those words, that he just feels like, killing his ex-girlfriend, and how people must have laughed, and Toots said that he was pussy whipped and that he had a gopwell. I don't know how they call it in Anguilla, but this is what I imagine that in our society here in St. Lucia, that's how the narrative would go down. Mit pussy whipped man, mit have a gopwell. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what it is. We just don't get it. That every time somebody acts out of the ordinary, how many times must we hear a young person hangs herself or, slashes her wrists or kills himself because of image issues, because people ridicule them, because people don't accept them for who they are. You don't have to agree with their lifestyle. I remember this clearly, this young Denry boy who identified as a female. I may not necessarily fully appreciate or understand where you're coming from when you're born male and then you identify as a female. I will be the first to say I may not necessarily fully appreciate and understand. But where is my place? Where is my place? In ridiculing you, in castigating you, in vilifying you, in not accepting you, when I may have so many more issues when I may be suffering myself in silence, where do I come off? Where do you come off? Teasing people mercilessly to the point where they take their lives. I know a number of young men, and I was running the numbers, and I was writing it down on paper, and I was saying to myself, oh God, there's this young guy who incidentally is related to me, who tried to kill himself because he was so depressed because of things that were happening in his life. Again, molestation. And then there was this other guy, another relative of mine, who, if you see him, he's the life of the party. He is, oh my gosh, he is the life of the party. If you're having a party and he's not there, you ain't got a party. And if he's throwing a party and you're not there, you're missing half your life. And the waves and the bouts of depression that come suddenly, it's like just overtakes. And to see a grown man cry, bawl like a baby, you've got to be heartless, absolutely heartless, to watch that and not be affected. And again, stemming from molestation, we have a serious dysfunctional relationship with sex in this country. Let me just put it out there. A seriously dysfunctional relationship with sex. And I am amazed, I am surprised that we do not have more mayhem in St. Lucia, where people are just acting out and just cannot deal, because we don't have a system where you can get counseling, where you can go in and talk to people and to get that release. And you know, a lot of men talk about how women are always discussing their business with other women, and they're always yep. But do you know that that is one of the reasons why more men complete suicide than women? More women may have the ideation, but more men complete suicide because they don't have an outlet. They refuse to talk. They believe that they're the only ones going through the situation, or that the other men in their lives will laugh at them, or that the women in their lives will look at them with disdain and disgust and just push them away. And so they internalize everything until it gets to the point where you actually implode or you explode. Neither option is a good one. You know, neither one is a good one. Now, how do you identify? And I always remember I was talking to you earlier I was talking to this clergy member, and we were talking about depression. And let me tell you something. If you're going through depression, or if you read up like me, I'm a voracious reader. I read up on a lot of things. Until you actually come face to face with it, unless you feel it for yourself or you go through it, you really don't know how you're going to deal with depression. You can do all the reading you want in the world, because the manifestations come so differently. There's not a cookie cutter solution to depression. There really isn't. So you may think you know about depression, but can you really identify depression in your loved one, in a schoolmate, in a classmate, a work colleague? Expert says major depressions may make you feel as though work, school, relationships, and other aspects of your life have been derailed or put on hold indefinitely. And I know people who've gone through this depression for a decade. They just go through it, and they're just motoring on, and they're just smiling. So somebody smiles at you and you smile back, but there's no joy in your eyes. There's no mirth in your smile. You're just repeating what you see. You're existing, and you're so adept at existing that it's like you're having a mirror image. So somebody's smiling at you, you smile. They ask you a question, you answer by rote. It's like, what's your name, Laura Japia? And the person smiles and you smile back. But are you really in the moment? Are you really communicating? Are you really corresponding with that person? You're not. It's like your life is just on pause. It's just on pause. You feel constantly sad or burdened. So you might not identify with sad, but you feel burdened. You feel like, wow, why me again, you know? Or you lose interest in all activities. Now, a couple years ago, I did a show on depression, and that was one of the things, the loss of interest in all activities, even those you previously enjoyed. And this holds true nearly all this. So it's not a moment where I real tired, I real feel like going out to play football today. But then half an hour later, your friend call you and you're like, well, I really feeling up to it. But you go and you're into it. No, you just don't want, you have no interest. It's like nobody can convince you to have interest. The things that really brought joy to your life, you're not interested in it anymore. And that's not a half an hour, 1 hour feeling. It's a consistent feeling all day long. And it can last for weeks and months. And like I said, I've known people who've battled depression for decades. During this time, you also experience at least 4 of the following signs of depression. And so we're going to go through that. A change in appetite that sometimes lead to weight gain or weight loss. So sometimes you see somebody looking nice and rosy and you think, oh, that person is happy. That person is bien oui. No, that person is eating away their problems. They're just gaining weight. There's nothing different in their lives and they're just gaining weight. Sometimes you see people gaining weight and they're not even employed. How the heck can you gain weight? You don't know where your next meal is coming from, but you're gaining weight. These are things that we need to look out. I'm not talking about people who are chubby all their lives. You know what I'm talking about people who suddenly gain a whole bunch of weight or lose suddenly a whole bunch of weight. Now we're talking about not just isolated signs. We're talking about the person has to have at least 4 of these signs. Insomnia or oversleeping. A slowdown in talking and performing tasks, or conversely restlessness and an inability to sit still. So you're either very lethargic or you always jittery, a loss of energy or feeling tired much of the time. And that's not when you've been working on a project and boy, you're real tired. You sleep, but you're real tired. It's like you're not doing anything. You're not exerting yourself, but you're constantly tired. You just want to sleep the day away. Problems concentrating or making decisions. Whereas you would have been a person who would be on the ball, be able to make decisions instantaneously. Now you're taking 2 weeks to come up with, okay, what am I going to have for dinner? 2 weeks later, you're still contemplating what you're going to have for dinner. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive inappropriate guilt, thoughts of death or suicide plans or attempts. So if you see 4 of these signs or more in a person, chances are that person is depressed. There are other signs that can include sexual desire, pessimism or hopeless feelings, anxiety and physical symptoms such as headaches, unexplained aches and pains, or digestive problems. There was this one particular person, and I know she had been battling depression for a while, but I wasn't sure at the time that she was battling depression. She always had digestive problems and she would go to the doctor all the time. And then there were a few of the other signs that I mentioned. But what really got to me was the digestive problems that she had. She kept going to the doctor and they kept telling her, nothing's wrong with you. Like, why are you manifesting these things? Nothing's wrong with you. But she's going to the wrong doctor. She's going to a doctor for internal medicine, but that's not the doctor she needed to go to. Thankfully, she was able to realize what was going on after talking with people. I think she was talking to some of us, and then there was a person who's not normally a part of our group who was there at the time who had joined the conversation and recognized what it was, because that person had gone through depression themselves. And so that is why talking sometimes helps tremendously. Now, we're not just saying, okay, just go about on the streets and tell everybody your business, because not everybody needs to be in your business and not everybody can give you the right advice. right? Not everybody can give you the right advice. But if you have a circle of friends, if you have a family member, you have a clergy member that you could talk to when you feel differently, seek help. Seek help. Sometimes it's so bad. I remember Britney Spears. And I'm using those examples because, we can relate to those persons that we see on TV. They're very far removed from us, and we watch their lives with relish. And we say that could never happen. Meanwhile, right next door, this is happening to somebody right next door. The neighbor has just come home, and with all of her long tresses, beautiful tresses cut off. But you know what? We find a justification for it. It's what's en vogue right now. So everybody's going natural. So she's cut off all her hair, and she's going natural, and she's doing all of that. That in and of itself, I did the big chop. But I did not manifest any other signs. So somebody could say, oh, okay. But mind you though, when I first cut my hair, a lot of people, men in particular, ask me, who am I rebelling against? Who am I rebelling against? And I thought I was very curious, and I was asking, and they said, the only time women cut their hair is to spite their boyfriends or their husbands. I thought that was kind of weird because I really don't care what you think about my hair. It's my hair, it's growing on my head, and if it's bugging me, I will cut it off. And if I choose to let it grow, I will let it grow. So coming from that perspective, I did not have an appreciation for what that person was saying. But more than one person kept telling me, more than one guy kept telling me, why you cut off all your hair? You had such beautiful hair. Who are you rebelling? The guy is going to leave you because, and they put all this emphasis on your hair. And I did not have an appreciation for what that was at the time because I really was not battling depression. So it really didn't enter my mind. But there are people who go through that. And so they cut off their hair because it's a cry for help. It's a cry for help. And we saw that with Britney Spears when she was going through her issues, her depression and whatnot. She just shaved off her head. She just shaved it off. And she was doing all of these inappropriate things. Walking around, no underwear, getting out of the vehicles, legs wide open, everything is exposed. Having all these kids and not being able to manage her finances until her family had to come in and petition the courts to that she's a danger to herself and not just herself because she had kids, And so they in effect, she became a child again where her family had to take care of her. So we see these things. We see this with the celebrities and it's like a soap opera for us. But like I said, that you could have a neighbor who's going through the very same things, but we're not paying attention to our neighbor because you know what? Every man for himself. I'm not my brother's keeper. But on the flip side, every Sunday, we want to say, hallelujah, praise Jesus, and pray for everything under the sun, except for a more caring attitude. A more caring attitude. And it's really, really, it's really depressing in a different way. It's really, really depressing. And going back to that clip that I saw, of this young lady, and it was terrible. It was, I found myself crying. I felt myself cold. I felt so many different emotions, but I also felt angry. Because I reached out, and it took me a while to muster the courage and to go find this person and to talk to this person. But people were just, who takes this? And I mean, I'm glad that it this is the one thing in all of this that I'm happy that it got to my inbox. And the reason, because normally I don't like people circulating these things. I don't like them sending it to me. But in this case, it really opened my eyes to the fact that none of us are immune. None of us are immune to depression. None of us are immune to depression. Sometimes you see somebody who always laughing, always smiling. As I said at the top of the hour, life of the party. And it's just a mask. It's just a mask. Sometimes something horrible happens in our lives. We lose our mobility. We lose our ability to sing. We lose the things that we identify as our core. A couple of weeks ago, I was watching a documentary on Tendi Pendergrass, and the depression he went through when he became a paraplegic, it was heartbreaking. You know, one of the things that he said, and that really, I watched this thing into the wee hours of the morning, and I cried when he said, even if he wanted to kill himself, he couldn't. You know, and he wanted to so badly to die because he identified himself as this sex symbol, as this crooner, this baritone dream. You know, that every lady wanted. Every lady had dreams of this man. I mean, whoa. Men wanted to be him and ladies wanted to be with him, even if it were for 5 seconds. And that's how he identified himself, to the point where when he had this accident, he could no longer move and he was no longer a sex symbol in his mind. He wanted to die. And no matter what happened, no matter what anybody had said, that was it. He'd made up his mind until he heard his family eulogizing and being seriously affected by his fake death. And then he said he didn't want to die. So sometimes we have to have these interventions when we see somebody actually literally crying out for help and coming out, and you know how much guts it takes to come out on social media and put yourself out there where everybody who knows you is going to see this, and this is a mass cry out for help. You're trying to target as many people as possible, and hopefully one person will hear, will see, will understand. what like I said, previous to the break, I came across, somebody sent me these clips of this young person who had been crying and crying out for help, and then some of the things that were being said, and somebody actually said, but she's always smiling and she's always so happy, as if to say that it's just, a ploy. And I think that's when the doubt entered my mind. Imagine, the doubt entered my mind, and I said to myself, I hope it's a social experiment, because somewhere in my psyche, I knew it was very real. There was a possibility of it being real. But again, because you're in denial, you're doubting, you're in denial, nobody likes to dwell on sad things. Nobody wants to dwell on the things that, make you, they're downers. They make you depressed, and so I was thinking to myself, maybe it's a social experiment. Let's wait a little while. Let's wait a couple of days. Maybe it's a social experiment. Maybe there's this new series. Maybe there's this local programming that's coming up. And maybe that is just a trailer, you know what I mean? A teaser to that. Let's just wait a couple. So when I realized, okay, nobody's saying, okay, that was a social experiment, maybe it's a teaser. So I kept literally looking to see whether there would be other teasers. And then there was nothing. But it kept staying with me. What if it's real? What if it's real and you're not doing anything? You're not doing anything. And one day you could wake up to the news that person has just completed suicide. It's no longer an ideation. It's no longer a cry for help. It's an actuality. It's a reality. And I said, no, you've got to do something. So here's what this person, by the way, her name is actually Laura Coward. Yeah, Laura Coward. She wrote this in 2016. How are you? Really? This is my mom's standard line of questioning anytime I dye my hair darker. In her mind, darker hair is equivalent to a darker mood. She's onto something, but in my case, she has it backwards. I'm best at hiding my depression when I'm blonde. When I'm brunette, I feel authentic. I literally let a little more of my darker side show. When I'm blonde, I'm bubbly, social, and easy to get along with. When I'm blonde, I'm the face of smiling depression. Now, before we went on break, remember I spoke to you about those persons who are always smiling and they can mimic. So you're smiling at them and they're smiling back. You're asking them questions and they're answering. How are you? I'm fine. But they're inside. It's like a knife is stabbing them, but they're fine. Every time you ask them, how are you doing? I'm fine. Even when you know they're not fine, they're fine. The face of smiling depression. So what is smiling depression? Smiling depression involves appearing happy to others and smiling through the pain, keeping the inner turmoil hidden. It's a major depressive disorder with atypical symptoms. And as a result, many don't know they're depressed or don't seek help. People with smiling depression are often partnered or married, employed, and are quite accomplished and educated. Their public, professional, and social lives are not struggling. Their facade is put together and accomplished. Can you imagine? How many people you're passing by every day? They're smiling. They're wearing the power suit. They're rocking it in the courthouse. They're rocking it in the classroom. They're excelling at school. They've got it made. They have the happiest semblance of married life. But they're hurting inside. Behind the mask, behind closed doors, their minds are filled with thoughts of worthlessness, inadequacy, and despair. They've usually struggled with depression and or debilitating anxiety for years and have had some experience with therapy or medication. Many don't disclose their depression due to fear of discrimination from loved ones or employers. So she continues, Laura, that is, oftentimes I am the only person in this individual's immediate circle who is aware of how he or she is feeling on the inside. Why is smiling depression dangerous? According to Dinah Goldstein Silverman, a PhD doctor, there's a troubling connection between smiling depression and suicide. In contrast with a patient who has very little energy to even get out of bed, chronically depressed patients who report a surge of energy might be more likely to initiate a suicide attempt. So, in contrast to the person who's lethargic and the face of depression as we want to see it, that person who's all of a sudden, it's got that burst of energy, who's doing things where previously they were so sluggish, that person is one step closer to attempting suicide than the person who is laid back and lethargic. Significant traumatic life changes, such as a recent job loss or divorce, are often predictors of suicide attempts, particularly in men. In some cases, having young children or being devoutly religious may serve as protective factors, but many of us know exceptions to that. This morning, a cousin of mine from New York sent me clippings of a child coming, and if you watch international news, you would have seen it as well. Coming out from under this train, there are two men who had jumped on the tracks. The train had stopped, jumped on the tracks, and were looking under, and then there was this child coming out. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did the child reach there? How did the child get on the tracks? Did somebody push her? What happened? And I tried to find out more. And there it was that her father was depressed. That happened yesterday. The father was depressed and called his wife, apparently, to say goodbye and to take care of the kids, because I think they had 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, but he was with the girl. And he called her to say goodbye, take care of the kids, and then jumped on the tracks as that train was coming, and in the process, pulling with him his 5-year-old little girl. Luckily for that child, minor scrapes and bumps and bruises, got discharged and sent home the same day. But the dad wasn't so fortunate. And here she is under the train. By this miracle she saved, and screaming, "Papi, Papi," concerned over her father, who was so depressed, who couldn't face life anymore, and in the process wanting to take his little girl with him. These are some of the things that happen to other people, but not to me. Not to you. Not to us in the Caribbean. Yet we are riddled with stories of persons who have taken their lives because they just couldn't live anymore. They just couldn't take it anymore. In a minute, I'll be showing you some clips, some pictures of persons who have battled depression, and so you'll see it, what we think of when we see depression, when we think of depression, and what smiling depression is. So it's the same person, depressed throughout, then one is obviously going through a meltdown, and the other is smiling like nothing's happened, but they're still depressed. We're going to open the lines right now. The number to call is 451-9788. You can send us your WhatsApp messages on 284-6536. That's 284-6536. Or you can send us your emails at laurajepi@gmail.com. laurashapi@com. And again, the number to call is 451-9788. You can share with us your experience of depression, whether it's you going through, or seeing someone going through depression, a mom, a child, a loved one, somebody from the neighborhood. What is your experience with depression? So Laura continued. One of the deaths that shocked my community the most was the suicide of a Sunday school teacher and youth counselor. Active in our church and several nonprofits, he mentored many and loved connecting with people. Was he disheveled, withdrawn, and a downer to be around? Absolutely not. He was encouraging, thoughtful, and went out of his way to attend and organize events, often in a suit and always put together. He was who we aspired to be when we grew up. Did we ever ask him how he was doing? If he was hurting? Or if he needed someone to listen to him for one? No. We bought into the facade and couldn't see the pain hiding under the surface. So he's always put together, always in a suit, always helping people, connecting people, helping people, pointing them out. A Sunday school teacher. And no one once thought to stop and ask, as Laura's mom would, how are you doing? Really, really doing? And stop to listen. And sometimes, Lord knows, you feel this weight on your shoulders and you go, when is it going to be my turn? When is it going to be my turn? It's like I'm always there for people. I'm always there. But when I need somebody to be there for me, I cannot find anybody. From the time I start talking about my problems, it's like you could see their eyes are just glazing. They're losing interest because it's not about them. And sometimes it's their way of coping. Because if you're always the person that they come to dump on, and today you're having issues, what will happen to me? So you see how selfish we could be as human beings. We're very, it's all about us. It's all about me. But think about it. If it's always about you and everybody else revolve around you and exist to make your life better, and it's always about an individual, when is it going to be their turn? Because they're human too. They have feelings too. They go through issues too. They go through pains too. When is it going to be their turn? So you're always dumping on them and making their lives even more toxic because they're not taking on your issues and trying to help you with your issues, but nobody's helping them with their issues. So their life's already toxic and you're adding more toxins to it. How are they supposed to cope? How are they supposed to cope? Have you felt that way? You felt that way? Do we have the pictures of the individuals with the smiling depression? We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll put up the pictures. Stay tuned. welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned. So before we went on break, the lines opened at 4519788, and WhatsApp messages at 284-6536, and your emails are welcome at laurajappy@gmail.com. And we want to just start by showing some faces of depression, what depression looks like. Some of the faces you recognize as depression, and some of the faces you don't. Let's take a look. We don't have pictures? Okay, so while we're fixing that issue, somebody sent me a message, and then they said, interesting topic, great, program is great, but you should have had a professional to discuss with you and to answer questions. And I want to reiterate that I do this show like this every year. I want it to stay in forefront of people's minds what depression is. But this time I wanted to do it without a clinical person. I wanted to do it just from the heart, because these things, they affected me. And I wanted the slant, and maybe later on in the year, we'll do another one where we have the professional and we can run ideas by and whatever. I wanted to share with you how your behavior, your callousness, your inability to reason, your inability to empathize or even sympathize with a fellow human being does not always only affect the person that you're directing your hate, your venom towards. It affects other persons around. It's like dropping a pebble in a pond and the ripple effect. So you drop the pebble and it ripples outwards, and it goes and goes and goes, and it touches. So those ripples are other people whose lives you're affecting, whose lives you're touching. So I wanted to come from that perspective. I didn't really want to come from a perspective where I had a clinical person. We've done that. And obviously, the persons who are depressed, they get the help. But I wanted to address those persons who could actually identify people who are depressed in their environment, in their direct environment, by being a little bit more sensitive to the needs of others. So I may have a neighbor, a sister. How many times we've come up, somebody's killed themselves, and then we say, then the family members say, I never saw them being depressed. I didn't recognize this. I didn't know that. There was a little girl who hung herself in her closet with her school belt. You mean to tell me nobody saw that? But again, we're not looking for those signs. We're not looking for those things because we think she's just a child. What does she have to be depressed about? What does she have to be sad about? All she has to do is go to school and live life and be a child. But there are other things in your environment that are affecting whether you're happy or whether you can cope. Maybe you're being bullied at school. Maybe nobody believes you. Maybe it takes you on. Maybe they're just telling you, grow up, toughen up, deal with it. Maybe the teachers at school are not being that safe that you need them to be. Maybe there's no counselor at your school. How can your friends, your best friends, sometimes friends, your fair weather friends, how can they identify with you? I wanted to look at it from that perspective. Yes, again, the lines are open. The number to call is 4519788. And we can take your WhatsApp messages, continue to take your WhatsApp messages at 284-536. of you sending messages saying good program, that you're enjoying the program. But I really want the lines to be opened for those persons who have come across what I've described, the smiling depression. You know, the person who is always the life of the party, who attempted or completed, and that's rocked your world, and how have you become a better person for it? Or maybe you are battling depression yourself, and how are you dealing with it, and how have you survived it? I think the photos are ready, the pictures are ready of the faces of depression. So let's take a look at that. So this is the guy that actually killed this young lady. So this young lady, this guy was her boyfriend, and he killed her because she didn't want anything to do with him anymore. She just wanted to be herself. Maybe she was too young. She didn't want to settle down. Maybe he was cloying. He was smothering her, and she just wanted to be left alone. And she wanted to be doing her own thing, and he couldn't deal with it, and so he killed himself. He killed her and didn't kill himself, sorry. But it's talking about how depressed he is. This is what we're talking about. On my left or your right, you could see she's smiling. There's the face of depression. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about smiling depression. But on my right, you could see what we think of when we think of depression. The tears, the crying, the body mutilation, the piercings, the different things. You know, there she has her hair red. Red is a joyful color, and everybody thinks that, okay, so your hair is red, you're happy, and all of that. But just like Laura Coward said, she's most depressed when she's a blonde and not when she's a brunette. Yep. Smiling depression again. You're smiling with your mouth, but your eyes are sad. You're not, you're just mimicking, you're high functioning. You're just existing. And here is Robin Williams, funny man extraordinaire. If you've ever watched Mrs. Doubtfire, Jumanji, these are some of the movies that he brought joy and life to the silver screen, and we all flocked to the cinema, the theaters to watch him. And in 2014, after years of battling depression, completed suicide. The face of suicide. Again, here she is looking like a model, looking the life of the party, going out and having it all figured out. But yet, she's depressed. In her quiet moments, away from prying eyes, this is what she looks like. And these are some of the faces of depression. These are some of these people exist among us. They're not just foreigners. They're not just Caucasian people that, and it just so happened that every picture that I put up was of a Caucasian person, and, you know, but they're not just white people. You know, they're right there in our circles, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our homes, in our communities, in our churches, you know, even ministers of government. You think that they have it all made, that they're charged with the responsibility of running the country. Even they are depressed. Even ministers of the cloth get depressed. The important thing is, what do they do about it? What do we do about it once we've seen the manifestations? How can we help somebody? And I want us to really focus on not being selfish. I want us to think about being more caring, reaching out more, saying, I understand. We have a call. Thank you for being here on the air. So we lost the call. You know, we have kids who, and somebody's just shared with me a clip of a child who is being abused. And I had gotten a clip earlier just before. So just imagine my mindset of going to be dealing with this, and then to see that this child has been slapped about and punched in the middle and dropped. It's a little baby, maybe not even a year yet. And this dad figure wanting him to walk, and he's unable because he's not ready, and dropping him and smacking him about. Now you at a young age are going through that kind of depression, and there's somebody actually videotaping this, and you could see the child is looking directly at the camera at this person who's videotaping it with plea in his eyes. Obviously he can't speak, he's crying and looking at you, and you're not helping. And this child has been exposed to abuse for so long, from such an early age. What do you think is going to happen as he gets along, as he grows up? And he's obviously going to be disappointing his parents, his family, because we are none all perfect. What do you think? Because he has experienced such abuse at a tender age, he's going to now know how to mask it. He's going to mask it. He's going to go through life, going to be either a goofball because he's mucking things up anyway and can't get anything right, so I'm going to be a goofball. I'm going to be like with a stick up my bum and be the straight-laced person, always trying to do things the right way. We have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Good night.
Good night.
Do you think that depression can lead to the increase of use alcohol?
Absolutely.
So people are depressed, they turn to alcohol.
I'm not saying that anybody who turns to alcohol is depressed. I have had experiences with persons who are depressed and they use the alcohol to mask it. And experts will say that is the things you do. You persons who are depressed, they will turn to substances to mask. So I'm always drunk. I don't have to think about what is depressing me. I'm always happy, so I can have this happy face, so I don't have to think about what's bugging me. But the thing about it is, after the effects wears off, you're oftentimes in a worse position than when you started, because nobody's around, and you've not dealt with the situation, just been able to mask it.
It seems to be people that are very depressed they want to be alone, but they don't want to have friends, they don't want to talk to people. Is that a sign of depression, huh?
Yes, that is a sign of depression. And earlier on I said that is what we identify with. And we'll show you the pictures a little, show the pictures again. We identify with the crying and the lethargic and the person who doesn't want to go out. But there are those other people, what the clinical psychologists call smiling depression. So they're always happy and they always have this smile on their face, and they're always well adjusted or well adjusted, but they're masking the depression.
So you find that love can lead to depression?
Well, I wouldn't say can lead to depression. I think obsession can lead to depression. I think if you're surrounded by love, and that's me here. Obviously, I'm not a clinical psychologist, but from what I've read, if you're loved and if you're surrounded by love, that's one of the ways you can combat depression. If you have persons around you who care and who support you and helping you through that, that's love. But obsession, where you feel like you cannot do without that person, that's no longer love. It's going beyond, that's crossing that line where you're obsessive and possessive, and if you can't have that person, nobody can have that person, or if that person doesn't want you, then you're going, that's not love.
So if you have an illness, right, that can lead to depression?
Of course, and I gave the example of Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy Pendergrass was this, turn off the lights, this guy. He was in an accident. I think he was only 32 or 34 years old. And once he realized that he could no longer walk and that he was not going to ever be able to walk again, and even doctors were saying he would never be able to sing again. And he wanted to die.
As you know, I'm a guy who don't like to be depressed. And I try to stay away from bad news, Some people love bad news, All that can lead to depression. Bad news, some people hook on it so much that it can take a negative impact on their life, Sometimes we have to see the brighter side, man. You know, they say.
But you see, sometimes we cannot. When you're depressed, and that's why at the top of the show when I started, I said sometimes you could read and read and read and read and read. And sometimes when the manifestation of depression comes, especially when it happens to you, so you know about it. You know, I like, for me, somebody like me, I read a lot, and I've done 2 or 3 shows like this. If I had the interviews with the experts in the field and whatnot, and then so you think you prepare. It's like being pregnant.
Okay.
You read upon it. Your sisters have all been pregnant. You've been around people who are pregnant all the time, and you think, yeah, boy, when it happens to you, you have this thing. You check, everything is check. And then when it happens to you, your pregnancy is nothing like others.
Anyway, have a good night.
Thank you too. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for calling. You know, and as I was saying to the caller, it's like it really is. It's like being pregnant. Everybody around you, you've seen this, that. This one had excessive morning sickness. This other one was okay. This one had excessive swelling. Do we have a call?
Yeah.
Hi. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, Laura. Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Someone is going through depression, or you see the sign. What should you really do about that?
Okay. So there are experts in the field. You try to deal with it yourself. Because, like for instance, like I said earlier, I'm not an expert. And so when I came across the video of the young lady who was obviously crying out for help, I was immobilized. I didn't know what to do, and I sat on it and I went through denial and I went through all of that. But there are places that you can turn to. I think government workers have an excellent program where they actually have this counseling, so they can go in and speak to a counselor, and it's confidential and it's free of charge. You know, there are persons that you can go to. There are counselors. There are therapists that you can go to. One of mine is Mr. Callistus Jalui. I've had him on as a guest here a couple of times. You know, go see somebody. Another person that comes to mind is Father Setut. He's a Catholic priest, but he's also a clinical psychologist. So he persons dealing with that. He has a clinic where he deals with that. So there are places that you can go to. Speak to somebody. Don't try to deal with it on your own, because you think could be the best advice or the best help could be detrimental. You just don't know the person's mindset. And another thing to always remember is the suicide hotline. There's a number that you can call, 203, if somebody is so depressed at that point where they're having suicide ideations and they're talking about ending it all. There is that number to call, 203, get some help. And there is somebody who will be there, who is trained to assist.
Yes, Lord. And what else?
a young man, 34 years old, who killed himself and his daughter. I mean, you have to remember that you're somebody's daughter, you're somebody's lover, somebody cares. Don't do it. Call 203, call the suicide hotline, but don't do it. Your kids deserve so much more than that. Please don't. This is all the time we have. Now I really wish that we could have gotten more calls, but the one or two that we did get and the feedback that I'm getting here on email, I don't know how to express more clearly. You think you're the only one going through. You think nobody will miss you. But do you know Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. Joe Blow down the road, who has it all made, supposedly, is perhaps battling this scourge even worse than you are?